think if we know what change we want to make, going back to that, I sound like a broken record, then we have to figure out what the easiest tool to use is. Maybe it's our fingers, maybe it's a massage tool, maybe it's whatever it is. Maybe it's just talking to the patient, right? But we have to know what change we want to make.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological. It's easy to be distracted from what's essential. Love, contentment with the moment and all its troubles and potentials, that we are alive in a perfectly imperfect world, that we both suffer and can find transformative meaning in all of the curious corners of life in which we find ourselves. It's easy to cast our attention outward and lose our voice to the cacophony of other voices and believe that theirs matters more than ours, to give our attention to experts, luminaries, and those we respect as knowing more about the world than we do. It is so easy to see where we're lacking and seek to fill that void with solutions that promise a wholeness that we thirst for. It's easier to follow than it is to lead. Simpler to nod in agreement rather than dare the discomfort of questions that we are not even sure how to intelligently articulate. There is an emptiness within that is too often conflated with the kind of lack, when in truth, it is the empty space of the creative. There is very little in life that comes from a feeling of comfort. It's usually that grain of sand at the core of a pearl, some kind of irritation that sets us off on a journey of creating meaning and discovering how we fit within the storm of life. Life has few guarantees. Nature's web of life, along with its resources and opportunities, are wildly unevenly distributed. Ecosystems are as varied and diverse as the turns a river takes on its way to the sea. There's plenty of room for suffering, as our ideas about the world are not the world. And while we have agency within the domain of our life, we are also as leaves in the wind, at the mercy of influences over which we have no control, other than in how we choose to respond. Life is capricious, and it's full of chaos. That chaos, much like the spring flood brings nutrient to the worn-out fields, that brings us the raw nutrient for a cycle of growth. Most of us wind our way into the practice of East Asian medicine through a circuitous path. So often, it's not that we find it, but that it finds us. In this conversation with Mark Parzynski, we discuss the tools that he creates by hand for our handmade medicine. We talk about the role of qi and intention and how the Ling Shu is a reliable guide for our ever-expanding exploration of acupuncture, and how our medicine demands our active attention. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear-Don't-Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Well, let's get into it. Mark Parzynski, welcome to Geological.
Hi, Michael. It's great to be here.
I am happy to have you here. I know of you because a friend of mine recommended your Gua Sha ban, the Gua Sha tool that you make, and I've had it now for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years.
Oh, great. Yeah, I've been making them for about 10. So, yeah.
It's an extraordinary instrument to hold in the hand. So I'm super happy to be here to talk with you about tools of the trade and how we use them, how you think about them, whatever else we want to talk about.
Great. Yeah. If you want me to go into the tools a little bit or where that comes from.
I'd love to go into the tools, but before we do, I'm always curious to know how people landed in the Oriental medicine world.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I started in martial arts when I was around 11, so early 80s. And I developed really bad arthritis in my right wrist, probably from a lot of jiu-jitsu training and joint locks and stuff.
How old were you when that happened?
Oh, it developed over the years.
Yeah.
And in around late 90s, I had a hand surgeon telling me that he wanted to saw my ulna in half and shorten the bone, which didn't sound good. So I wound up figuring that I wasn't going to be able to do martial arts anymore the way I wanted to. I took a Tai Chi class because that's not real martial arts, or so I thought.
It's dialed back, yeah. So you thought. Tell me more about that. So you thought. What happened?
I met Gregory Fong, who became really like my main teacher, guru, mentor, and showed me just how good of a martial art Tai Chi was. But within a year of training with him, I didn't have any arthritis anymore.
Wow.
I was working out on a heavy bag. I was doing planks on my knuckles. There was no problems with my wrist after about a year to a year and a half. It's 22 years later. I still don't have any arthritis in my wrist. And so that kind of inspired me to figure out what the heck was going on here.
No kidding. What an introduction.
And so, I studied with Gregory Fong until he passed away in 2016. And really, as much as my studies at OCOM and everything, and studying with lots of great acupuncture teachers has influenced me. I think his teachings, probably more than anything else, have shaped where I am as an acupuncturist. And he wasn't an acupuncturist. He was Tai Chi, Ichuan practitioner, lifetime martial artist, but really amazing man. Yeah.
For me, this is one of the amazing and wonderful things about the medicine that we practice. On one hand, we've got acupuncture, which essentially is a method, right? It's not the medicine, it's a method.
Absolutely.
It's a way of exploring this thing called qi. You can do it in other ways. You can do it with food, you can do it with meditation, you can do it with movement, you can do it with Tai Chi. I'd like to know a little bit more about, and it's great. It's like, I had to dial back, do something soft like Tai Chi, and then it's like, no, actually, Tai Chi is pretty badass.
Yeah.
I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah, when you're younger, you like to mix it up a little and you get into things. I'm approaching 50 at this point, and my goals have changed in life. But doing jiu-jitsu, there's this mentality of, we do the real stuff. But there's a certain mechanics that you get in Tai Chi, and I should say that Tai Chi is one aspect. Each one is really the art that Greg taught. He used Tai Chi as a way to get people in the door and to pay his bills. But each one was his first love. And it's all about mechanics. It's about distilling things down to their simple, most functional form. Can you move with the most efficient functionality? And what that kind of mentality taught me was it taught me how to use the jiu-jitsu that I'd studied before properly. It taught me how to use body structure, how to use mental focus, because it's all about E and using E to align your Li, right? So we want to get our physical structure aligned with what we're doing mentally. And that's the whole of it.
Okay. So this Etron that you're talking about, because I'm not familiar with it, my first thought was, it's like one something, but it's not the one E, it's the significance E.
It's mind, it's intention, it's awareness, focus.
That's right.
Yeah. There's a great history to it. There's this guy, Wang Jingzhai, who was around in about 1900s in China, and he traveled all around China. And he gets to Beijing, and he writes this great letter, and he says, I've traveled all of China, and I've taken on all fighters who would challenge me, and I found exactly 2.5 people that could beat me. And I studied with them and I learned from them. And if he calls out Yang Chengfu, he calls out the Wu brothers, he calls out all of the top martial artists at the time. And he basically says, look, you're teaching the wrong stuff. If you disagree with me, come and have tea. We'll have a discussion. And the legend is when people would show up for tea, he would ask them where they want to sit, and then they would find themselves there. He would just effortlessly move them into the chair. It's a legend, whatever. But he was really known for cutting the BS out of martial arts. And his thing was, we shouldn't be obfuscating the truth. We should be sharing things freely. Let the knowledge out, because what happens when we hold back, which is a cultural thing in China very often.
I think it's true in all cultures. You got something good, it gives you an advantage.
Yeah.
If you share that with everybody, now you've lost your advantage.
Absolutely. Yeah. In martial arts especially, right? You don't want your students beating you up.
Well, and I think in the medical arts as well.
Yeah.
You'll lose your patients.
His thing was share stuff freely. Let knowledge be open. Let it all out. Let's talk about stuff. Let's distill stuff. Let's see what really works.
Let's all get better.
Yeah. That rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing.
I love that story. Where do you want to sit? And then he effortlessly guides them there. I think about working in clinic, right? Someone comes in, it's like, what do you need? Where do you want to go? And our job is to effortlessly guide them there.
Yeah. I think that's the thing about our medicine, right? I think we have to know what kind of change we're trying to make, right? I think intention is so important. And oftentimes we think, oh, Deadman wrote in his book that this point does X, therefore I'll use this point. But that's not really thinking about the change you want to make, right? When you start to learn points, become intimate with certain points, like,
I don't think it works unless you're intimate with the points.
right. Absolutely. I have this thing for spleen 6. I do everything with spleen 6. Everybody gets spleen 6, right? But I don't use it as spleen 6 necessarily. I studied with Shimamura, and he was all about spleen 8, except his spleen 8 was pretty much anywhere on the inside of the leg. Is that spleen 8? Who cares?
I love it. I have a very intimate relationship with lung 6. It shows up all the time. I can use it in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Liver 6, same thing. Yeah, that's great to hear. So tell me more about your relationship with spleen 6. Because I know you're not thinking Deadman wise, and I know that you're not thinking, oh yeah, spleen 6, it's a heavy hitter, anyone can use it. There is that, but it sounds like you're coming from a different place with it.
Yeah, I think I just started with it as, it's 3-leg in, and you can access, I love crossing points, so you can do a lot with it. Like I said, I'm about distilling things down. So I want to use as few needles as possible. So when I have a needle that's or a point that's a crossing point, or something where I can access a lot of functions, I go there and I stay there and I work with it. I'm the kind of acupuncturist that likes to sit with a point and get the change and then just remove the needle, right? I've got some Japanese training. Ling Shu says, when the chi arrives, withdraw, do not repeat. So I don't retain very long at all in patients most of the time. So I can sit there with a crossing point and I can be with the patient and see what's going on and see what the change is. It's a big part of how I approach things, rather than put a few points in and walk away and hope for the best. There's merit to that too. There's definitely merit to letting somebody chill out on the table. But it's generally not the approach that I use.
I was talking to a fellow who does Japanese style acupuncture in the past month or so. His time with patients is roughly 15 to 20 minutes because he doesn't need more time.
Yeah.
And people often have busy lives. They're happy to come in and, wow, 20 minutes later, great, I'm done.
Yeah.
So there's that too. But yes, and at the same time, it's great. Plenty of merit too. You put some needles in, you let people spend a little time with themselves. That right there, I think, is therapeutic on a number of different levels.
I do all the work I need to do on the patient in the first 15 minutes. And then a lot of times I'll put 1 or 2 needles in wherever and just walk away and let them chill out and go do my chart, or just because I think we all need to chill.
Yeah.
But I'm done in the first few minutes of treatment, usually, depending on what it is.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, this idea of the arrival of qi, de qi, the arrival of qi, I'd like to get your slant on it, especially with your training with the E. Because we hear this thing about, it's like feeling a fish, bite on a hook, or sometimes the patients, especially if you're doing strong-handed Chinese style, you'll kind of levitate them off the table. And you could call that qi. I've noticed sometimes you put a needle in, a person's complexion will change, or the feeling in the room changes. So I'm curious to know what you're tracking when you're tracking the arrival of qi.
So I'm heavy into Ling Shu. I keep going back to the Ling Shu. And what the Ling Shu says in chapter 1 is all of acupuncture is to tonify the deficiency and reduce the excess. And we're looking for balance. And balance comes in, and our markers come. We can talk on a physical level when you're first learning to palpate. When I put a needle in, if I feel, say, spleen 6 is deficient, right? I feel this hollow in spleen 6, and I put that needle in. I want to feel spleen 6 fill up. I want to physically feel spleen 6 fill up. Or if it's cold, I want to physically feel it heat up. And that's how I know I can remove the needle.
Very objective.
I'm looking for an objective physical change. I think that's kind of step one when you're learning acupuncture. But I think there is a much more, I'm going to really try to avoid using the word intuition. But I think there's a sense that we build as acupuncturists. I think intuition is something we build over time. It's not something that you start out year one as an acupuncturist and you have this great intuition. Over time, we gain this kind of knowledge that we can't necessarily put into words because we've touched 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people, and we get the sense, and you feel that. I don't believe the patient can tell you when you've achieved Da Qi. I think that as practitioners, we have to have that understanding. The patient doesn't know the difference between nerve pain and Da Qi. Oh yeah, I feel it. It's electrical. Stimulate it more. No. So I think we have to know when we're doing what we want to do. And we have to know what we want to do before we start doing it.
Back to that intention piece. I hear that word intention a lot. And often when I hear it, I don't hear anything under it. It's like, well, just use your intention.
No.
Intention for what? And you just added the piece. It's not that I've been trying to figure this out, but it's one of those things that's been annoying to me when I hear the word intention.
Yeah.
So you got to know what you're looking for.
So there's a key component to intention, right? So there's, I don't know if you're familiar with 6 harmonies.
I am not.
So it's used a lot. The Luhe is used a lot in different martial arts contexts, but it really applies to everything. So the 3 external harmonies are really easy to understand. It's just hands and feet, knees and elbows, shoulders and hips. But the 3 internal harmonies are something that I think answers that intention question. So the first harmony is the Yi must harmonize with the Jinshen. So your heart mind. In this context, we're going to say the knowledge you have. Blood houses memory stores knowledge, heart. The heart mind must be in alignment with your intention or your focus. The second one is the Yi must align with the Qi. The energy you're putting into it has to align with your intention, right? If I'm thinking about my laundry, but I'm doing X, it's not really going to work out well. And then finally, the Qi must align with the Li. So the physical manifestation of movement has to align with your energetic output. So in other words, I could sit in my car for a week and intend to change the tire. If I don't know how to change the tire, if I don't get out of the car and change the tire is not getting changed, right? So we have to have all these other components to back up our intention.
You can't just sit around and think about manifestation. You got to roll up your sleeves.
No, you got to do the work.
You got to do the work. Yes, indeed. I love that character Li. The Chinese translation is something along the lines of the image of the pattern that runs through a piece of jade or the grain of wood. It's like the coherence of something. It's the structure, the actual physical, in this world structure, how it's put together.
Yeah.
And often translated as coherence as well. It's a wonderful concept, and I really appreciate your putting it together with the idea of the internal and external as well. It's really helpful. That gives a real grounding to intention. Now you got something to work with.
I think one of the things that I got from Gregory Fong, because he was very interested in getting things as simple as possible, but making things absolutely practical. And he had this great way when he would ask you a question and you would give him an answer. And if your answer was complicated or you were using words that he didn't think you really understood. He would do this move where he would say, oh, my English isn't very good. Can you make it simpler? And he would just keep repeating that until you either realized you had no idea what you were talking about, which was most of the time, or until you could distill it down to something simple and put it into plain language. And I've been a supervisor over at OCOM for a few years, and I kind of do that with my interns. I don't supervise over there anymore, but when I was supervising over there, I would do that with my interns. And if they said chi, they better be able to define chi. I think language is about communication. And we as a profession could probably do a better job at defining the terms we use, because I guarantee you, when you say the word chi to me, you might mean 8 different things depending on the context. And I might interpret them 20 different ways that you're not intending, right? So we have to come to an understanding of what the words are that we're saying as we say them, because communication breaks down.
Absolutely.
And we talk past each other.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. And it's so easy to think that because we're using the same words, we attach the same meanings or have same experiences. It's just not the case.
Yeah.
I remember one of my teachers talking about that if you can't explain it to like an 8-year-old, you probably don't really know it that well yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And I find in my practice, because years ago I gave up trying to teach people Chinese medicine 101. That was not helpful for anybody. The challenge for me has been, and it still is to some degree, depending on the person, how can I speak with them in a language they understand about what I'm seeing and how I intend to help?
Yeah.
It's a great exercise. I fail at it all the time. I'd like to turn to the tools that you make.
Yeah.
Were you like a silversmith or something, or a metalworker before you went into Chinese medicine?
So my undergrad degree is in art, and I studied jewelry making and silversmithing in school. And then what all good art majors do, I started repairing industrial machinery for a living. And I did that for 12 years.
Oh, the orthopedic side of the trade.
And that's what I was doing when I started going to acupuncture school. I was repairing industrial machinery. And one of my instructors pulled out a set of gold and silver Teishin. And they're beautiful. And I looked at them and I was like, I could make that. And so I went home and I started making a Teishin. I brought it back and I proudly showed it to him. And he had this great way of telling me how bad it was, but then encouraging me to try again. And I did that over and over and over. The first Teishin I made compared to what I make now, it's night and day. But I've always loved tools. For a while, there's a chain of lumber stores here in Oregon and Washington, and if you go into the lumber store and look at their radial arm saw, it'll have this plexiglass guard on it. I designed and built those and installed all of them, right? So that was my life before. I'm into tools.
Mm-hmm.
I think tools are things that should absolutely make our lives easier. And if going back to the Ling Shu, right? So Ling Shu starts out, right? Huang Di is saying, we need to give the people good health care. And I'm not sure how to do it, Chibo. What do I do? And what are Chibo's first words? You have to know about the 9 needles and the techniques that go with them. That's the first thing he says.
You need some tools.
The 9 needles. Right. So how many needles do most acupuncturists use? The 7th, the Gua Sha, right? The filiform needle is like, some of them use the bleeding needle, right? And occasionally when you get into the Japanese practitioners, maybe they have a Teishin in their box. But the first 3 of those needles are massage tools. You've got the arrow needle, the egg-shaped needle for separating the muscles and sinews without damaging the viscera. And then you've got the Teishin for treating the channels without penetration, right? The first 3 are massage tools. The second 3 of the 9 needles are for removing body fluids. We've got the bleeding needle, the sword needle, which is basically a scalpel for opening up carbuncles and furuncles. And then you've got the horsehair needle, or the round sharp needle that puts big holes in people for draining edema, right? Not the acupuncture we practice today.
Mm-mm.
The last 3 needles are closer to filiform needles. Most people stay in that realm, but I think there's so much more. I think if we know what change we want to make, going back to that, I sound like a broken record, then we have to figure out what the easiest tool to use is. Maybe it's our fingers. Maybe it's a massage tool. Maybe it's whatever it is. Maybe it's just talking to the patient, right? But we have to know what change we want to make.
When I was in the 8th grade, I had a shop class.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. We made things.
Yeah.
We cut wood up and hammered it together. We heated metal up and pounded it and turned it into fireplace tools.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was like the coolest class. And the thing that the teacher would always say, right tool for the right job, boys.
Absolutely. My wife occasionally wants to hammer something into a wall, and she'll come to me and she'll be like, can I borrow a hammer? And I'll say, what are you using it for? I've got like 30 hammers in my shop. You have to have the tool that's going to do what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm constantly refining. I refine, like I said, the Teishin has changed so many times. That Gua Sha tool that you mentioned earlier that you've been using for a few years, the first few that I made were, I think I did 7 or 8 prototypes before I started. But since I got that prototype, and this was while I was in a master's program, 12 years ago I was doing this, I made that tool, and I just, over the years, the curve has changed subtly, the texture has changed subtly, the way I finish has changed subtly. It's all just about you keep tweaking it. You keep making little refinements over the years. And yeah, it's the same tool, but it evolves, right? And it evolves as I learn more as an acupuncturist, and I'm using it and go, God, I wish that would do this. I can't seem to, that was challenging. So can I come up with something that will do that?
There you go. I want to stick a pin in Teishin's, no pun intended. I want to come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to get a little more into this Gua Sha ban that you make. Like I said, I've had it, I think, for about 3 years now. When I first got it, it was this beautiful shiny copper with this nice hammered texture. I mean, it's just beautiful to look at. This really subtle curve. I sound like an advertisement. I'm not an advertisement.
I appreciate it.
I'm really appreciative of how gorgeous this thing is. The thing that's really wonderful about it is that over the years, it has acquired this kind of a patina.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's warm. it's so lovely to hold it in the hand. It's just delightful. And like you were saying, there's a curve that you're looking for. It's like a flower petal. You know how flower petals kind of curve a little bit sometimes? It's a very subtle, natural curve. And my wife loves Gua Sha. And so we use this tool on each other all the time. I don't use it in my clinic, actually. It's become kind of a sacred item in our house that we just use with each other. It's got that kind of special place. I sound like a fanboy now. I didn't know I was going to go on like this. It really is extraordinary. And one of the things that I've so appreciated about it is, maybe you can tell us more about how you came to this, but there's like these different edges. There's one edge that'll like really get, like, if you want to get in and like rub a little bit, pull apart the tissues, say, between the toes.
Yeah.
Like where liver 3 is. There's this one little edge that does that really well. And then there's this other edge that works really nice for a certain part of the neck. And then you got these wider areas that are good for like stroking down the whole back. Tell us how you came up with the design of this. Was it simply from, I need a tool that does X, Y, Z, and so you were scratching your own itch, or was there some other place where this came from?
I mean, I was using, when we learned in school, it was a spoon, and the spoon always annoyed me because spoons are for soup. And so I borrowed a friend's Graston tools.
Oh, those are hilarious.
Yeah, I borrowed his Graston tools, and I got about 10 or 12 different Gua Sha tools in a pile. And I started finding the most useful curves and playing with them. And just went through and tried different materials and tried different shapes and just kept working until I found something that would do what I want. And like I said, over the years, it's changed a little bit. I think it probably, after the first year I was making them, it probably had really taken the general shape that it is now. But there were several manifestations, very different looking and different materials. I tried making them out of solid silver. I tried making them out of like bronze and different metals. And I really liked copper. It has this affinity with the blood level. And there's just something about that material. Come to find out now that it's very relevant. So they've been doing a lot of studies with copper in hospitals now. Apparently it's an antiviral material. Viruses don't live on it. So if you keep it clean, viruses don't live on copper. So they're starting to coat door handles and stuff in hospitals with copper, which is very cool. But it's a material that more and more I've been working with. I used to really like silver and gold and still love silver and gold for different things, but there's something about copper lately I've just been latching onto.
Yeah. I was wondering about the different metals and their affinity, say, for different levels of qi or different structures in the body. Energetically, I've heard about different stones and crystals and things like that. I don't know much about it. But, you hear people talk about it. Oh, this has an affinity for that. This has, affinity for something else.
Right.
I'd love to get your thoughts on the different metals that you use and how you think about properly utilizing them in the clinic.
Yeah. So there's some really cool things when you relate metals to their actual physical properties. If you look at gold, silver, and copper, right? So silver is the most thermally and electrically conductive material on the planet. And if you go from silver, copper, gold, that's the order that traditionally we think of as reducing, neutral, tonifying. It's the exact order of that thermally and electrically conductive material in inverse. So going down that scale, it directly correlates, which is kind of neat. For me, traditionally speaking, that's silver is usually used for reduction, gold usually for tonification. Copper is more tonifying, but in the middle. That's what we traditionally say. I have a different take. I think probably because I've inhaled the dust of this stuff. I've like gotten it into my skin and tasted it. And like, I've been way too intimate with this material that I'll probably pay for.
You pound on it with hammers. You smell it when it's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately feel it when it's hot sometimes. But I think they have just their own personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we as practitioners have personalities that mesh with different metals too. Now, silver, what I've seen over the years is silver, because of this electrically conductive and thermally conductive, maybe because of it, maybe not, I don't know. But I think it's the easiest to kind of have that intentional connection with. What I've seen is people can kind of make silver do what they want with it. Whereas gold kind of has a personality, and it's going to kind of put its own personality into what it's doing. And same thing with copper. It's kind of got its own like personality that it puts into things. Where silver, you're like working with a blank slate. And then I feel things like I've made some stainless steel tools, and they always just feel dead to me. They feel flat. Yeah. So, and I've found that the more something's an alloy too, so the more metals that are mixed with it, generally speaking, the flatter it starts to become. It's kind of like mixing colors in a painting. When you mix colors, you start out with these vibrant colors, and you start mixing paint, and every color you add to it, it just gets grayer and grayer and duller and duller.
It's like using too many needles in a treatment.
Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
muddy the situation.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Your thoughts about that different people would have an affinity for different metals, I hadn't thought about that. But I hear you say it, and I think that's right.
I knew a practitioner, another Japanese style practitioner, and I'm not strictly a Japanese practitioner, but this gentleman probably say he is. He was doing for a while, he had probably about 6 different Teishin of all different metals. And he would feel their pulse and place it on CV12 and let the pulse tell him which Teishin to use on the patient.
I was taught to do that kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
And I was taught to do that kind of thing because that way you could tell what's the right Teishin for that person. I'm thinking about this in reverse. What's the right Teishin for the practitioner?
Yeah.
That's a different way of looking at the equation. What's the right tool for me? We were talking about points earlier.
But I think you're doing that too, though. I think you are measuring. When you're taking a pulse, are you just taking the patient's pulse? Or are you making a connection, a bond with that patient? I kind of feel like you can't just measure the patient. You can only measure the patient through your own lens.
Of course.
And so when you're placing that Teishin on CV12 and you're taking their pulse, it's what's right for that conversation.
I can see that. I'm very curious to go into clinic. I've been playing around with Teishins again recently. And I just like this idea that, I'm kind of a copper Teishin guy. I'm just kind of a Midwest Bubba Grunt kind of acupuncturist. And, I'm good with a copper needle. It's my thing.
Yeah.
I just like that idea. I have found that I'm, generally speaking, using a silver needle, using a silver Teishin, works for me better. Gold Teishins, I know the theory behind it, but they always feel a little foreign in my hands. But that's just me. You're the first person to, now that we're having this conversation, suggest that it's not about the metal particularly, but that the practitioner and the metal, their relationship.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play with that. Thank you. That's exciting.
And you might also find, though, that if you've got a gold needle lying around, there might be a patient that walks in the door and you're just like, that's gold needle time.
Gold needle time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing your tools is so important.
Yeah, and as somebody that makes and sells tools, I'd love you to buy all of them. But if I'm absolutely honest, I think it's much better to have one or two tools that you're really familiar with
Mm-hmm.
than it is to have the whole arsenal and barely know what you're doing with them.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Hey, what are your thoughts on titanium?
I've only played with it a little. I don't have the equipment to work it properly. I haven't used it that much. What I've felt of it has been, first off, it's too light in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I like to feel what I'm holding, but it has that same kind of like, it's got this airiness, this, like it, I don't really connect with it, I guess. It's light in my hands and I just don't really feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Iron? Have you played with iron?
Iron's cool. Iron is very, very neat. I have an iron needle that I made a while ago, an iron Teishin that I made a while ago. To me, like when we talk about copper going to the blood level, iron has like a one-track mind to the blood level.
Mm. Well, that's interesting given what we know about hemoglobin.
Right. Yeah. But it's very cool. Years ago, I went on this quest to try to remake the 9 needles in their full glory as they would have been used. And I made 2 sets. I made one set out of copper because there's copper age. And then I made one set out of bronze because that would be the evolution of things and trying to place when things were written and what these tools might have been made of. And it was interesting. First, I mean, this is kind of tracking to a different side of things, but you have to know how to sharpen needles to use them. Like you have to be a little bit of a metallurgist to be an acupuncturist if that's what you're using. But feeling the different materials, and then like I moved forward and I started to try to make stuff out of iron, but my equipment really is not designed for iron and steel. It's just, and I abandoned the project at that point. But there's definitely a huge difference as you move through time and you move through metallurgy. And I think that's one of the reasons we all use the 7th of the 9 needles now. 2,000 years ago, that needle would suck to use. They were thick. They dulled every time you inserted them. They would probably break often, or they'd not be work hardened enough and be too soft. So there were all sorts of problems. And now that we have these beautiful stainless steel needles for insertion, I mean, the metallurgy matters. You can do so much with that one needle now that you couldn't have done in the past.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. Because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital qi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have the technology that we do. There certainly is that. I want to come back to the Teishins. Originally, you saw the Teishin and you thought, oh, I could do that. It's always such a great place to start, isn't it? It's like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah, from hubris.
That doesn't look so hard. And thank goodness for that too, because otherwise we might never start anything.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between like a poorly crafted teishin, let's say a beginner's teishin, and a more masterful teishin?
It's small things. To use another analogy, if I'm playing tennis and I have the best tennis racket in the world, and I play against Andre Agassi, who's got the worst tennis racket in the world, I'm still going to lose. So skill matters. Let's just put that out there.
Yes.
Funamizu with a toothpick is probably a better acupuncturist than me with the nicest Teishin on the planet. So with that out of the way, it just becomes subtle curves, subtle refinements. There's different parts to the Teishin. You've got a tip, a tail, a shaft. You've got necks that are leading to the tip and the tail. And sometimes you've got like an extra little component to it, usually either ribbing, which adds functionality. I've made like jewelry Teishin for people with crosses, and I made a Teishin in the shape of a lightsaber for Funamizu, who's a huge Star Wars fan. So it was a lightsaber Teishin for him. So we have all sorts of different things that...
I want the R2-D2 Gua Sha tool.
Right, yeah. Oh, a picture just jumped in my head. Well, I'll think about it. So you can have all sorts of different shapes.
Mm-hmm.
But some shapes take away from functionality and some shapes add functionality. So when I was in Japan, I saw a Teishin that was square. It was square and really sharp. And I was like, this doesn't seem very good. I use super rotation technique. Should have done my super rotation. How can I do that with this? And so the person told me, oh, this is for blind acupuncturists, so it doesn't roll off the table. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
There it is, function and form.
The right tool for the job.
That's
right. So Teishin needs to fit your style. I've made a whole bunch of Teishin for New England School of Acupuncture. They commissioned me to make Teishin every couple years, and they have a very specific Teishin they want, and it's very lightweight, very thin. I would never use it personally.
Mm-hmm.
They use it. They get great results with it. Their style is very static. They stay on a point. The person teaching it stays on the point, holds it there. He's got very subtle technique. I like a heavier Teishin. I move around a lot. Funamizu was one of my teachers. I don't know if you've seen him practice, but he is moving constantly, and I would bend that Teishin, right? So the Teishin needs to match the style you're using. And so you make different adjustments depending on what it is. And when I first started, I was using something much thinner. Now I'm using a much heavier Teishin. I've added ribbing to it. I'm doing different things. Usually I have like one or two Teishin that I'm selling as regular products, but I do custom work, and usually that Teishin that I'm selling is like 2 iterations behind what I'm actually using in the clinic, because I change what I'm using and I have to live with it for a year. And then I'm like, okay, I guess this is really what I think a good Teishin should be. And I might start messing with my website a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking for a happy medium for production. I guess you can call it production. It's one at a time, me hammering stuff out, anvil. But it really needs to match what the practitioner is doing. That's why there's so many different shapes of Teishin. They're all sticks. They're all sticks with a little tip and another end. But my first teacher taught us to use toothpicks. That's what I learned with, was a toothpick. Can you change the pulse with a toothpick? If you can do that, you pick up a good Teishin. It's a lot easier, right?
I got a piece of bamboo here. Can you change the pulse with the bamboo? I love it. I've got a wooden sword.
Ling Shu talks about stone needles. They were making needles out of bamboo. They were making needles out of shards of rock.
Yeah. Do you work with gems at all? Do you play with stones or gems? Does any of that enter the work that you do?
Not too much. I've done some settings for stones, and I've set some stones into Teishin, and I've set stones into other tools, but typically not. I don't really. There's a whole other lot of it. I have a very small shop. My shop's my garage.
Mm-hmm.
It's limited. I've got 2 motorcycles in there and a jewelry making bench, and I've got limited space. So if I start putting lapidary equipment in there, it gets a little cramped.
No, just wondering if you in your own work had any kind of affinity for stones or brought that kind of consideration into the medical side. I know some people do. I don't know anything about it myself, but I know some people do.
I've played with it a little, but not much.
Yeah. But quality of the metal, that's something that you know about.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the alloy. So one of the things I use whenever possible, especially in the Teishin, is I use fine silver instead of sterling silver. So fine silver is 99.99% pure silver. Sterling silver is 92.5% silver, and then 7.5% other stuff. Generally, you're looking at copper being added and some other things. If you have a bad refinery, sometimes lead. It can be anything, but it's now I do use fine sterling silver in some tools because it adds durability. So if you're using a tool that you're scraping across somebody out like a chokishen, I'm going to go for that material. But with the Teishin, I always use fine silver because to me, when you start getting that alloy more and more mixed up.
Yeah, you're talking that it muddies it up.
It muddies it. So I like to try to stay as pure silver and as pure copper as possible. The gold, I typically go for like a 14 karat, which is an alloy, but I think the durability to functionality ratio is about correct. And I've handed it to practitioners who swore before that they could tell the difference and handed them to Teishin, was like, okay, which one's the 18 karat, which one's the 14? And nobody's been able to tell me which is which. So I always like to test things.
Yeah, good idea. Well, and it sounds like the design of your Teishins comes from your own clinical experience. You take them into the shop, so to speak.
Yeah.
Work with them with patients. Do I need to change this? How do you know you need to change it? Because you're using it.
Right. And every teacher I studied with or study with changes my mind as to what I should be doing. And right, if they're a good teacher, they should change your mind in some way. So
should put that on a bumper sticker.
Yeah. So every time I study with a different teacher that uses Teishin, and sometimes that don't use Teishin, but every time my technique starts to change, I'm like, oh, geez, now I got to like rethink this. And luckily, that's just me going to the shop and hammering out something new. I don't have to like call somebody and be like, I need to commission you to make this. So I can have something up and running the next day that I could test.
That's cool. For me, I think the hardest part about that whole process is I need to change something. It's usually upstairs in my brain that I need to make that change. That's always the hardest space to get to change. It's so hard to break habits or let go of things that have been successful and worked to make room for something else that might even be better.
Right. Yeah. I try to add it in. So I try to, when I have a new thing I want to test out, if I'm doing something with a client who's in distress, they've got needs, you've got to help, right? I'll typically do what I know how to do to get them feeling good, and then I'll try that new thing out. I can always fall back to what I know.
Yeah, it's tricky sometimes adding in new things because we know what we know how to do, and we want to be of as much service as we can to our patients.
So going back to Gregory Fong again, one thing he used to tell us in martial arts is you should train for what you don't know. A lot of people really like to practice the stuff they already know how to do. And so we keep doing the same thing over and over and over, and we don't get any better, or we just get better at that one thing. And so he had colorful analogies. One of the things that he would say is you have to be willing to flush your toilet. People eat a lobster dinner the night before, and they don't want to lose their lobster dinner because that's their lobster dinner. But you have to be willing to flush your toilet. He was a colorful character. But yeah, so practice what you don't know how to do.
I love the sound of that. The idea sounds wonderful. And I know, as with so many things, the actual practice of that is probably much more difficult.
Yeah.
Any tips for venturing into those spaces?
Just let it go. I mean, that's it. You just have to be willing to fail. You're going to fail at anything new 10,000 times before you get it right. And if you're not willing to fail at something, you're just going to do the same thing over and over and over.
Which is a different kind of failure.
Which is a different kind of failure. Yeah. So you have to be willing to try everything. Just embrace it. Just embrace trying new stuff. And it's not the end of the world if you don't get it right the first time.
You know, on occasion, there is that thing called beginner's luck. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in people around me. If the universe is being generous with us,
yeah,
we step up to something that we've never done. It's like, and you really step up. It's not just like, oh, I hope this works. It's like, no, you're in with both feet. You have skin in the game. And sometimes you can get dramatic results early on.
Yeah.
And now you spend the next 5 years figuring out, how does this stuff really work?
Right. That how is so important. I know people that are content with it works, and they don't venture into the how it works or the why it works. I think when we have an understanding rather than just an ability to do something, you can have a great ability to do something, but if you don't understand what you're doing, it's so much harder to move forward. And I think seeking understanding, seeking the why and the how of it really just makes us better.
The how is so interesting. I've noticed this, especially when I want to try to learn something new or do something different. I'll get a vision of where I want to go or something that I want to do. I won't know how to do it, but I know what it is that I want. And the how comes over time. It's like if you start going in that direction, the how will reveal itself through your learning. It's actually the joy of learning. And at the same time, you know, it's terrifying because you're on the path. You don't quite yet know how it all works. And that does take time.
Yeah. Luckily, there's some great teachers out there that can help us along. Nobody can give us the answers, but they can certainly help us find them.
Those are the best teachers, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if folks would like to find you and your lovely tools, where would they do that?
Yeah, so you can go to acuartistry.com.
Just like that. Great. I'll make sure that that's on the show notes page as well. And do you do custom work as well, or just mostly production at this point?
I do. When we say production, it's all one at a time.
Right.
Anyway, so changing something a little bit for a particular person's never a problem because I'm usually making it when they order it. But yeah, I do occasional custom orders, like bigger, like I've been lucky enough to make some. People that order custom tools often are willing to pay for things I'm not. So I get to work with different materials and do some neat stuff. So yeah, I do custom work.
Great. Actually, I do have another question. because you've been at acupuncture for a while and we've been talking about the learning process here today, amongst other things in this discussion. For people that are new to practice, right? Maybe they're about to graduate from school or they're recently graduated from school. Any advice on getting through the next 3 to 5 years?
That's a tough one.
We have a lot of students that listen to this, and so that's why I'm asking. I'm asking for them.
I really think we are an alternative to the established medical thing. Don't feel like you have to fit in with the current model. So many people I see go out and try to do the insurance thing, and that's great, and it's a great path. We need people doing that. I think there's lots of ways that you can be creative and earn a living and reach people that wouldn't normally be reached by the normal medical establishment. Because generally people seeking us have been through that. And so if we're just copying what they're doing and becoming them, which we do need some people to do that, but we don't need everybody to do that. So follow your gut and your heart and be a little creative about how you set up your practice, because I think that will make you stand out.
It would make you stand out, and you'll probably have more fun too.
Yeah. Otherwise, you get burned out.
That's not good for anybody. All right. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. This has been thoroughly enjoyable, and I'm going to go dig out my copper Teishin that I haven't seen for a while and go play with it.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, Michael. Thank you so much.
One of the themes we touched on in this conversation was, can you make it simpler? One of my reminder mantras is simplify, and I fail at it all the time. And yet, I think my best work is when I have been able to distill out the essence of what I want to communicate, or pare away the details and confusion that surround the kernel of a potential idea that's worth exploring. Can you make it simpler? What can be removed that will improve a situation? What can be edited out to make an idea invitingly contagious? Getting to the heart of a matter is not a process of embellishment, but one of distillation. That reminder to simplify and use that to guide your intention, that is a potent practice. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.